Welcome back to today's commentary. If a nation can be coerced into an agreement that costs hundreds of billions of dollars, surrendering territory, relinquishing arms, and even ceding sovereignty, all for the mere label of independence, who can still have faith in so-called international justice? In the globally discussed 28-point peace plan, a shocking clause mandates that 300 billion in frozen Russian assets in the West will be legalized for Ukraine's reconstruction, with 100 billion to be withdrawn immediately. The US gets 50% of the profits, while the remainder goes to joint US-Russian projects. No military victory needed, just a signature, and the money officially changes hands. But who is truly winning? Who faces the choice? Sign and lose everything, or fight to the end to protect every tax dollar, every inch of land, and national pride? This isn't merely about Russia and Ukraine. It's a high-stakes political, financial, and existential game where words can be exchanged for blood or power. We'll dissect the American-style peace plan through a vivid documentary lens where every detail is real and every decision alters global destinies. If you miss the end, you may never understand why 300 billion isn't just money. It represents the credibility of an entire world order. The first clause in this so-called peace plan has stunned many because it's not an agreement between equals, but a list of demands from a rulemaker to a nation on its deathbed. Ukraine, once aspiring to join NATO, must now constitutionally declare it will never join. Not a suspension, not a delay, but never. A curse written in cold ink and the sweat of battlefield warriors. NATO, which once patted Ukraine on the back, also confirms Ukraine will never be part of it. Furthermore, a nation at war is required to limit its forces to 600,000. Imagine, the enemy has full arsenals while your army is shackled by an arbitrary number. Who checks? Who monitors? And if exceeded, who defends Ukraine? Or will there be just applause and condolences on TV? Ukraine has long been without nuclear weapons, but this clause tightens the chains, dictating that they must play the role pre-written for them. A nation disarmed, with limited troops, denied membership, what sovereignty remains? The Ukrainian soldier, in soiled uniform, silently gazes at the 30-clause document, each a sharp blade, not from defeat, but from trusting hands that never truly held them. They thought the West was a support, a lifeline, but it was a soft trap, baited with flags and sweet promises. The question arises, was Ukraine betrayed, or did it push itself into this game? If you are Vietnamese, understanding the struggle for survival, witnessing the gains and losses of a nation, you'll know that no peace comes from dependence, and no independence is guaranteed by conditions. A nation is only truly independent when it can refuse. When a paper is signed confirming Crimea and Donbass belong to Russia, the world calls it concession, peace, a necessary trade-off. But for Russia, it's not a trade. It's a belated recognition of what has long occurred, where the tricolor flag has waved on rooftops, in trenches, and in the hearts of millions of Russian speakers. Donbass, ablaze for 8 years before the special military operation. Its people don't call Moscow an invader. They call it a return. Every child grew up amidst shelling. Every elder planted flags on burnt roofs, not to seek recognition, but to affirm, we are Russian, and we never changed. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, per the 28-point plan, become temporary, demilitarized buffer zones under Russia's control. Temporary, a soft word concealing harsh reality. Borders are vanishing. No old boundaries remain. No Ukraine as before. This worries the West, because from Hram to the Sea of Azov, a red swath is spreading across the geopolitical map. Clear, definite, indelible. Each colored area marks spilled blood. Russia redraws the map not with ink, but with the blood of soldiers, forgotten civilians in shellings, and assimilation policies. Is Russia invading or reclaiming? The answer isn't on the negotiation table but in Donetsk's markets and Mariupol's bullet-scarred walls. If you lost your home for speaking your native tongue, you'd understand why Russians fight not to expand, but to protect. If one believes Russia is a land grabber, consider, do invaders rebuild schools, power plants, and roads amidst fire? Or do returnees cherish abandoned lands? Ultimately, one must ask, does a people have the right to reclaim what's theirs, or must they forever kneel before a map drawn by others? $300 billion, not in safes or Russia's central bank, but quietly in US and European government bonds. Russia invested as any nation seeking to secure its reserves. Then war erupted, and money became a hostage in a geopolitical game. Americans don't steal, they freeze, then profit. Billions in interest steadily flow to Washington and Brussels, funding Ukraine's fight for freedom. A clever game, Russian money, but bullets fired at Russians. No shots fired, no declarations of war, just rewriting the terms in the international financial system. Then, the peace plan, a seemingly simple clause, withdraw $100 billion of the frozen $300 billion to rebuild Ukraine. The US keeps 50% of profits from that $100 billion. What about the remaining $200 billion used for joint US-Russian projects? It sounds civilized, modern, fair, but it legitimizes seizure under the guise of peace. No need to rob, just rewrite the law. The Russians understand. They don't object out of ignorance, but because it's a rigged game. Signing means confirming their assets are no longer theirs, a dangerous precedent for any nation with large foreign exchange reserves. If it's Russia today, it could be anyone opposing Western interests tomorrow. Conversely, if Russia stands firm, the US and EU bond system falters. Who will buy? Who will invest, knowing that money can turn to stone overnight? Credibility is global finance's backbone, but the West trades it for a political battle. As Western analysts ask how much Russia needs peace, they admit that those needing an immediate agreement are those running out of money. The question isn't whether Russia will sign, but if you were Putin, with $300 billion held, blood spilled, and popular support firm, would you take the money or reclaim honor? After negotiations and glossy terms, the Western peace plan boils down to two choices for Russia. Sign to lose $300 billion, cede financial sovereignty, close the military operation with a cold handshake and empty praise, or continue fighting, defying pressure to win what no document can replace, recognition from history. Putin stands at this crossroads, neither reckless nor swayed by Western media applause. He calculates every move, and his silence often holds the world in suspense. For Russians, peace has never come from negotiation. Deep in their historical consciousness, they know that power begged from others is never true power, and land awaiting Western recognition is never truly theirs. Russia doesn't need anyone to acknowledge Crimea, Donbas, or Kherson. They need truth established by action, undeniable presence, and an irreversible outcome. Signing the plan might recover assets, but the cost is honor, something an empire that repelled fascism and bled to protect every inch of land cannot bargain away. Is $300 billion enough to buy a superpower's silence, or is something more, a spiritual collapse, needed? Putin knows accepting this plan would earn praise as a leader for his people. But Russians don't need pity. They need respect. They don't need peace bestowed. They need victory etched in history. Some nations sacrifice territory for money, but some sacrifice treasure to keep their flag flying high, so their descendants don't bow. Perhaps giving up hundreds of billions for 1,000 years of honor is a bargain only a true empire dares to make, something the West may never grasp. After Russia's special military operation, European leaders swiftly declared comprehensive sanctions, cutting gas, oil, trade, and technology, as if turning their backs on Moscow would suffice to maintain honor and prove their stance. But winter came. Paris saved electricity. Streetlights dimmed. Malls cooled less. Berlin was colder than usual, with long lines for blankets and firewood. Protests erupted in Prague, not against Russia, but against their own government. They sanctioned Russia, but Europeans paid the price first. Russia stopped selling gas but lived on, producing, fighting. Meanwhile, Europe shivered from energy shortages, Electricity prices tripled, companies closed, factories reliant on cheap Russian gas laid off workers. Workers, ignorant of geopolitics, became victims of a war they didn't choose. Ironically, while French citizens turned off lights, the government pledged billions more to Ukraine. Germany, once an industrial icon, now imports coal, a fuel it swore off. Russia turned to Asia, expanding trade, selling oil to other impartial customers. It's not just about gas, it's a profound paradox. They cut ties with Russia to show strength, but it made them most vulnerable when winter arrived. In every war, those shouting slogans don't always win, and those punishing aren't always strong. The final survivor understands the game. Is Europe fighting for an ideal or sinking into a self-made quagmire? If their people suffer cold, hunger, and unemployment, who is truly punished in this war? One thing is certain, Russia isn't the first to waver, and history never favors those who punish themselves to punish others. Amid unresolved conflict and tightening sanctions, Donald Trump unexpectedly re-emerged, not as ex-president but as head of a peace council, a novelty in international relations. Americans call it a humanitarian initiative, but observers see Trump returning not with political power, but with financial and strategic power. A hand extended amidst red lines, not entirely selfless, because Trump does nothing without reason. He speaks little of ideals, much of profit. In the peace plan, the U.S. receives 50% of the profit from the $100 billion drawn from frozen Russian assets, while the rest goes to joint projects. In Trump's eyes, peace is a deal where the biggest earner wins. Oddly, Russia doesn't object to Trump's leadership because Putin knows that amidst a confused Europe and a feigning moral America, Trump is brutally frank. He doesn't unconditionally support Ukraine or peddle democratic slogans. He just asks who pays and who benefits. Are Russia and the US secretly colluding? Is Trump, with his business acumen, mediating to open doors for larger bargains where resources and geopolitics converge? If so, what is Ukraine? A pawn, a buffer, or just a pretext for dividing spoils? In this political drama, Trump isn't the hero but the one who clarifies the rules and dares to flip the table when the reward is great enough. For Russia, he's a formidable opponent but a negotiable partner. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one screaming on the battlefield, but the one smiling in a closed room. On November 20th, while Western media analyzed the peace plan, a slow, clear, unmistakable voice echoed from Moscow. The Russian people rely on us, rely on you, and expect the results the country desires. Not a casual speech, but a vow. Putin mentioned no money, no gains. He emphasized completing the special military operations objectives unconditionally and addressing the tasks set by the motherland and the Russian people. It's no longer a war but an affirmation of identity. For Russians, victory isn't conquering territory or recovering frozen billions. Victory is when a Russian soldier returns, head held high, when a child in Donetsk learns their native language without threat, when those who burned Odessa are purged in Kyiv with no chance of repetition. Putin knows he's not just speaking to voters but to millions carrying memories of the Great Patriotic War, cherishing their Russian identity worldwide. He doesn't need to shout, because every word conveys, "We won't be fooled again." No peace is worth more than national pride. If honor is sacrificed for peace, that peace will soon be betrayed. Putin didn't appear on TV to bargain. He appeared as an experienced leader, knowing the cost of every decision but willing to pay it if it brings freedom to his country, to the long-forgotten, much-despised Russian-speaking community. From that moment, the world knew Russia was no longer negotiating. They await no ceasefire from Washington, need no recognition from Brussels. They choose to end it as history remembers, with victory. The question isn't whether Russia will stop, but whether anyone can stop them when the people have chosen. History has called, and their leader has declared that no force will rewrite Russia's destiny again. Perhaps, no nation has entered war led by a comedian, but that's the true story of Ukraine, where applause from TV shows became votes, and the stage microphone became a government command. Zelensky once made the world laugh. Now, even a smile is a luxury for his people. From spectators, they became victims. From hope, Ukraine became a modern tragedy, painful, absurd, and regrettably unrewindable. Look at reality. A country with geopolitical potential is now a ravaged battlefield. Factories are deserted, ports empty. Children flee to Poland, Hungary, and Romania for life, escape, survival. Adults serve in the military, elders count pennies. A nation whose youth is burned daily, not by artillery, but by the wrong decisions from those they once trusted. The mistake wasn't choosing someone inexperienced. It was entrusting a nation's fate to someone who thought politics was like writing a play. Here's the translation and rewriting of the provided text into American English, with a touch of interpretive flair and slight expansion for clarity. Imagine a sitcom script, full of suspense, surprises, and ultimately, a happy ending. But life isn't a TV show, and when the laughter fades from the script, all that remains is heartbreak. The West made so many promises. They pledged protection, aid, and even membership, but in the end, those were just empty promises, buying time at a steep price. Ukraine paid with blood. Its economy crumbled, territory dwindled, and its people were divided. Even the voices of Russian-speaking citizens in the Donbas region, once an integral part of Ukraine, were silenced. A nation that blindly follows the wrong leader must endure darkness to truly appreciate the value of light. Ukraine's story forces us to confront a seemingly simple question. In times of existential crisis, who do we truly need? A leader who can crack jokes or one who can safeguard the nation? And if history were to press record once more, Ukraine would likely pray that the next episode isn't another tragedy. But to prevent that, the charade must end, and a rude awakening is needed. While news reports relentlessly broadcast casualty figures, devastating losses, and deadlocked negotiations, something is quietly becoming apparent beneath the thick dust of war. Russia hasn't lost. Russia still holds Crimea, Donbas, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. Russia maintains control of the front lines and dictates the pace of conflict. Russia hasn't crumbled under the weight of sanctions, isolation, or even distortion of facts. Meanwhile, the West, supposedly the enforcer of global order, is now paying the price for its overconfident moves. Europe is exhausted. The United States is grappling with internal divisions and a soaring national debt. A shattered Ukraine, a mere shadow of its former self, has become a pawn on the negotiation table, no longer a player. And Russia, despite facing hundreds of sanctions, being labeled an aggressor, and enduring a global information blockade, perseveres, fights on, and even thrives. True strength isn't measured by frozen assets, market indicators, or promised aid. It lies in steadfast resolve, in a nation's unwavering belief in its cause, in knowing deep down that no one but the Russian people have the right to rewrite Russia's destiny. Russia doesn't need forgiveness because it has never apologized for protecting what it holds sacred. It doesn't need peace if that peace is offered as a trap, nor does it need a deal if that deal demands submission. Russia may not speak volumes, but it answers with actions, by refusing to retreat, by standing firm against Western pressure, and by forcing the world to reassess every move, every statement. When the smoke of war clears, when the news cycle slows, and when the sounds of gunfire fade, history won't ask who was right. It will only ask who stood firm. And if you're hearing this from a neutral perspective today, ask yourself this. If a nation is willing to sacrifice money, benefits, and recognition to preserve its identity, isn't it the true victor? If you believe in Russia's resilience and wisdom, not through compliments but through how it overcomes every obstacle, share this video so that more people understand that some battles aren't fought on the ground, but within the hearts of people. And in that battle, the most steadfast will ultimately prevail. Yeah.